On the painting table today, I'm showing you how I've done my Chaos Cultists. Now these are using the Blackstone Fortress models from the Escalation that I've dug out of my pile of shame, but they are still available separately. I think they're called Cultists the Abyss, about 15 quid or something. Now I remembered I had these because I'm finishing my Death Guard and I wanted to add some Cultists into the Death Guard, and this is an ideal opportunity to finish something off my pile of shame, but also use these models in multi-function, so I can use them in the Blackstone Fortress, but I can also use them for my Death Guard, so win-win both ways. Now because of that, I want to try and tie them in to both systems, so tie the colours into what I've done for the Blackstone Fortress, which I am going to finish off my Instagram. I'm not going to show it on YouTube, so if you do want to check my Instagram out and see what I've done on there for the other Blackstone Fortress models, it will be on there, because I'm finishing it at about the time I'm publishing this video, so check it out. I want to tie it into that. I also want to have some links to the Death Guard. So I'm starting off with an Army Green from Army Painter. Now any colours I use will be in the description down below as per normal, so check that out down there if you want to. So I'm using an Army Green, and this colour is kind of like the colour you would paint your like Cadian Guardsman, for example, but it's kind of halfway between that and a Death Guard green colour, so it should tie the two things in quite nicely. So I've done that on all the trousers, the cloths, whatever. Then I moved on, as you saw there, into a red colour to do the tattered bits of cloth. You know, those details that they would have added onto themselves to show their, you know, allegiance to chaos and start moving themselves away from being, you know, guardsmen and loyalists. Onto the flesh, I'm doing two flesh colours. You see on there, I put a flat flesh colour and I put a dark brown colour on there because I want to do two different skin types. One, it's more interesting visually in the unit. Two, it gives you, you know, something different to do, and you're not just painting the same flesh colour sort of again and again. So a couple of reasons. It also works really nicely for a unit like this that is quite varied amongst it with, you know, spikes and chains and whatever. If you do a second unit, for example, of the same models, where you can paint the skin colour on the duplicate model the opposite you painted it the first time, so it's just a useful way if you're planning on doing multiple units. So now I'm onto the webbing, you know, the straps, the pouches, whatever, and I'm using a green-grey colour, which is kind of just an off-khaki colour, again to link to their sort of military past, so all the strapping and webbing is still linking to what the Guard would have done. As you can see through this, I'm going to show you a different stage on a different model, just so you can see how they're all progressing. Now working onto the heavy weapon trooper, and I'm using just an abaddon black here to do the casings of the weaponry and the boots, and I paint the hair on this model. Now the reason I've chosen to do the casings in this black is, again, that's what I've done on my Death Guard. You know, the casings of the models I've done black, and this is just another visual link to tie it together that says, look, they're not exactly the same as the Death Guard, you know, they're corrupted loyalists, but there's those links that make it look like a uniformed army. Similar thing with, you know, the bone on the helmets. I think I've seen these painted a few times where these horns are done black, or they're done, you know, in metallic colours, but I'm doing it the bone colour here because that's what I did on Death Guard and tied it in. You'll notice if you watch my Death Guard painting videos, which I will link down below if you fancy seeing it, if you haven't watched it, I've done very specific like city bases with cobblestones. Now on these models here, I've done a metal mesh colour because that's what I wanted to do to tie my Blackstone Fortress together. But that's perfectly fine to use them in the Death Guard army because, again, we're invading an imperial world, you know, in that kind of background, and there will be industrial zones that work there. So although different elements of my army will end up being based in different styles, so that I can use them in multiple systems, it will visually tie in because it's the invasion of imperial world. And I'm not going to show you painting the base, but I'm going to paint the earth on this base in the same fashion that I paint the earth on the bases of all my models. So again, being able to use these models in multiple systems whilst at the same time tying them in but keeping them separate, so works quite well in my mind. Now we're going on to some of the metal colour you've seen there, just painting any details that I fancied in that retributor armour. The bulk of these models I've left in the silver because, you know, that was the spray and it's a big time saver, but I do want to pick some details out. You see here on the flamer, I've picked out the nozzle of his flamer in the retributor armour and some of the horns and things, and you can do as much or as little as you want. So now we're on to the flames. You'll see I've used three principal colours. There's a flat red, there's a black, there's a yellow, and then what I've done is I've mixed an orange using red and yellow. Then I've mixed a very dark red using the black and red, and I'm now doing a 5 colour stage up the flames. You'll see here, so I'm starting off painting yellow where the flames initially come out of the flamer, then moved on to orange, then moved on to a bright red, then moved on to the dark red, and then moved on to the black. And we do that colour transition up the smoke trail or flame trail because that's how smoke and flame would come. Now you'll see I've painted these 5 colours on very quickly, so that's so that it's still wet on the flames. Now once I've done the first layer, I'm going back with those colours and I'm taking them and merging them together on the model while it's still wet, which is why you have to be very quick. This is why I'm only doing one side of the flame, and I'll move on to the later. So we are blending those flame colours up the model as we go. So a little bit of what's kind of wet blending on here. Now, as you'll see here, I'm not cleaning my brush in between. You know, it is going in my mouth, and but you know, if you don't eat a bit of paint, something's wrong with you. Don't do this with enamels. So I'm going back and forward real quick into there, not cleaning my brush in between. And don't be afraid of going back, you know, 10, 12, 15 times, because you've got to put the paint on, merge it together, very thin coats, don't go wodging too much on because you'll ruin the detail, but keep going back and forward until you think, right, I'm now happy with that effect, and stop. And you know, the nodules of fire that come out, the little bits, you can do in a different colour on that different ridge. Is here I'm putting a red onto the orange bit. Keep doing that until you're happy, and then do the other side. Now we're on to an ink stage, and I ink everything, even the flames and everything on there, using a Vallejo ink, which is kind of a dirty effect ink. That's one of my particular favourites, but again, any ink's preferable. But if you're going to do this, don't do it with like a fleshy coloured ink, like a Ryclon Flesh shade or whatever, because there'll be too many pinks in there that'll ruin it. So if you're going to do it with either a sepia shade, Agrax Earth shade, that kind of thing, if you're doing a workshop version, but I use the Vallejo. Now at this stage, you could stop here. So see, I'm just showing you a couple of models and what this now looks like with all the base coats down, and then the ink over the top. And you know what, this would be an absolutely fine battle ready force at this stage. But what I always like to do, if you've seen other videos you'll see, is go back over with all the colours we've already used. Now because I use a wet palette, they're all still wet, so this is the night after the painting, so also the same colours I'm still using and still available for me to use there, but if not, just drop a little bit on there. Now what I'm doing, you'll see, I'm just dragging the paint away from the bulk of the paint blob there, and just using a very small amount to go back on just to the raised areas of these models. So I'm not going into the recesses where the ink has hit, I'm not going onto the flat surfaces where the ink has flowed off, just doing raised areas and going through the model with all those colours and following the exact same steps I've done already. But rather than painting it on, you are almost, you're not edge highlighting, but you're just kind of highlighting the model, putting some focus onto those raised patches with a very small amount of paint across every single colour we've already done, including that wet blend effect on the flames, but just go slightly gently than last time. So again, really simple, effective way of getting a unit for the table. As you see, that's the unit done. Quite happy with how it looks, really happy with that kind of flame and the blending effect, and a lovely unit of cultists that I can now use with my Death Guard or into a Blackstone Fortress games. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have, like, subscribe, comment, all that kind of wonderful YouTube jazz, and check out my Instagram, Adam's Hobby Stuff, if you want to have a look at that, and the other Blackstone Fortress pieces that I did finish off straight after doing this unit that won't show on here. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again on another video.